Our family.
Our family.
Our family.
Our family. Our family.
No, we didn't know what to expect, to be honest, because again, it comes down to what we've heard from family and friends when they've done it. And they, a couple of our friends seemed like they struggled and they only got 1 or 2 viable embryos and only ended up being able to use one of them, for example. So we had that in the back of our heads.
Yeah, I think you were quite you were quite anxious to go through that process and see how many we could get.
I think just for anyone that does, like, there's certain things you worry about, like even when you're doing the injections to stimulate your body to get ready for the eggs, like we were like, are we doing the shots right? And obviously we got training, but you worried like, oh, a little drip came out. Did I lose some of the medicine? Is that going to affect everything?
The great thing with that is if you do feel like that, is that there were a lot of online tutorials that were helpful, and also we could just phone up and just speak to them, or when we had our consultations were so regular that we had the opportunity to ask them, are we doing this right? This is what's happened. And they would always be really good at kind of just explaining, no, that's fine, or actually try it like this, see if that helps.
Yeah.
So yeah, even when there were moments where we were like, oh my God, what,
And it didn't make a difference. Like for a couple of drops that, you don't get from the needle didn't make a difference, because actually we ended up with 24 eggs. So it was a good
number.
It was a good number. And it was, it made us laugh, because it's like, okay, just so you know, it's 24 eggs, but the number goes down. We have to see how many are mature. And then actually 19 of them were mature. And they're like, okay, they may not all fertilize, but then 17 of them fertilize. And they're like, okay, the numbers will go down by the time you get to day 5. But by day 5, the blastocyst stage, we had 13 embryos that were good. So we were just like, wow, what are we going to do with all these embryos? And so it was one of those things where we had all these misconceptions or these thoughts just based on everyone else. And I mean, I'm sure their clinics have done a fantastic job as well, but we felt that because of some of the extra steps Harley Street took, as opposed to some of the steps maybe other clinics didn't take, it really contributed to how successful, at least for us mentally, it feels like it contributed to us having such a high number of viable embryos that were of really good grade. And then we were asked about the genetic testing, and we thought, again, if we want the very best chance of the embryo transfer to be successful, it's good to get the genetic testing to make sure all the chromosomes are there or none are missing, etc. So we did that step as well. And we had after that, Dr. Venkat got in touch to just make sure we understood what the results meant and what the next steps would look like for the embryo transfer. So yeah, it's been a very successful process. It's been a very enjoyable experience, because we weren't sure, just because of other people's not having been as successful. And
that's it. And I think at times it felt like there were a lot of appointments, there were a lot of scans, there was a lot of traveling back and forth. But actually now you realize that every single one of those things were necessary to make sure that we had the very best opportunity to get, as many eggs as possible to give us the best possibility of having, a strong, healthy child at the end of it. So it was definitely worth it, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, she's lovely, isn't she? I mean, we worked with Dr. Venkat, and then I'm going to say her name wrong. Dr. Leave. Okay, so she's a newer doctor that's joined from Belgium. She told me she's from Belgium, but she was fantastic. She actually started my process and ended my process. Dr. Leave, yeah. So she started it from.
We had an initial consultation with Dr. Venkat.
Oh, Dr. Venkat's been fantastic in terms of the initial consultation and then consultations throughout, just giving us more information about how everything works, what your next steps are, what your options are, even with sperm donors. So for us being a same-sex couple, understanding, well, what do we need to be aware of for things like that. She was fantastic throughout in terms of, and very knowledgeable, very kind. super smiley, which really helps. She's always energetic. It doesn't matter if it's 8 a.m. or 4 p.m. when we've had an appointment. She's always very like ready to go.
Yeah.
Very enthusiastic, which really helps because it's, you know, she's probably done thousands of consultations, but she's just as happy when she does, like, you know, she called us yesterday to give us about the genetics results, and she was just as happy then as the very first time. So yeah.
Yes, brilliant.
Yeah, that lab, those amazing embryologists in that lab, the things they do, like working on the weekends, checking those eggs, those embryos, making sure, like, I've gotten calls from the lab on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm like, these guys don't ever stop because those little embryos need to get watched, they need to be monitored, which is, that's quite passionate to sit and, you know, make sure that everything is working correctly and they're all growing correctly. And we were really happy that you know, they kept, after the retrieval, the lab was great, calling me the next day and then on the weekend and then on the Monday, on the day 3, on the day 5. So you kind of, it was nice to see that number come up on your phone because you knew you'd get an update on your little embryos and how they're doing. So it was
Who did you speak? Who did you speak with? Sam?
So Sam a couple of times, and then another younger woman,
Maya?
Maya, yes,
Maya.
she emailed me as well. So Maya and Sam both contacted, you know, each of them called me a couple of times, which was really nice. So yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. Steve, Steve a few times, and then the young woman that's always there. Gosh, I can't remember her name now. She has she had an accent, but yeah, I mean, maybe it was
she blonde. Joanna, maybe.
Yes, she was blonde. They were always really lovely. Steve was great because he was the one that had to deal with all my millions of questions about the forms to submit to my company for fertility reimbursement. And yeah, they were always really funny, very nice, like, you know, really, really personable. So they're good people to have at front of house.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I would just say, absolutely, we would 100% recommend Harley Street Clinic. I think I mean, it's obviously we're aware that everyone's different. And I said that before, you know, everyone's journey is going to be different. Everyone will have their own kind of obstacles to overcome or challenges that they face. But I think there's one thing that we know for sure is that Harley Street Clinic will absolutely help you every step of the way and do everything that's possible to make sure that you get the very best. And I think that's definitely been our experience. So just, yeah.
And I think from my, from kind of I'm taking the same sex side of it, because it's interesting. You said you haven't interviewed many, but I'm sure you've had a lot of clients that are, but I never was treated as though it was any different. You know, no one ever said, oh, you know, your husband or this and that. Everyone was always like your partner, even if they didn't know. It just always felt like
it's really respectful.
It was very respectful. So it was quite nice because no one, you know, if I said, oh, my partner, like everyone used Karleen's name, which was amazing, even though most of the nurses and the doctors didn't meet Karleen in person. They'd always say, and Karleen, and, you know, they'd ask about Karleen, which is quite interesting. And I really enjoyed that because it can be a scary journey for a same-sex couple because there are, you know, different stigmas, I suppose. Although we did see a couple of same-sex couples in the waiting room when I came a few times, but I think my message would be that go in open-minded, because the success you'll receive, you know, regardless of what you've heard about other clinics, you know, we were blown away with the treatment and the care and the respect that we received throughout the process. And I genuinely believe that if the extra steps or the different approach that Harley Street took from what we heard from other friends that have gone through the process contributed to why we were successful. So fingers crossed the embryo transfer goes well. You know, Dr. Venkat doesn't see why it wouldn't be good. She's got these nice techniques she wants to use for that as well, which is amazing. And yeah, that's our view for the clinic.
Yeah.